YouTube, it's Tone, back with another one for you. This one is a continuation of International Bill of Exchange process. We ran through a little bit of it in the beginning as far regarding the UCC1, UCC3 that you got to get done, and then how to assign partial assignment of the interest of the initial lien over to one of your instruments of whatever you're going to be making an acquisition toward. Right, so now we're going to get into here a little bit of the laws, codes, and statutes that back the actions that are being taken as far as issuing instruments against the national debt, which is an obligation of the United States. So we're going to get into that shit right now so you understand what it is and why you can do this and why you have an absolute right to do this shit. So the Notice of Memorandum of Law points to the authorities in support of International Bill of Exchange. So, and keep in mind too that when you use this, you literally are saving the country 10 times whatever it is that you would have bought using Federal Reserve notes. So look at it like this. For every $1 that you use this against, you literally save the country $10. So and every dollar that I discharge, because that's what I do mostly, every $1 I discharge, I take $10 out of the national debt. So I'm already personally, just me, I've already discharged about 70 million just off the national debt of the United States. Okay, which obviously stimulates the economy because it brings the debt down, and they can fucking make more monopoly money out of thin air, right? So they can just keep the bullshit going faster. So notice a memorandum of law points and authorities in support of International Bill of Exchange. So those who constitute an association nationwide of private unincorporated persons engaged in the business of banking to issue notes against the obligation of the United States do them, whose private property is at risk, to collateralize the government's debt and currency by legal definitions. A national banking association, such notes issued against these obligations of the United States to that part of the public debt is due its principals and sureties are required by law and to be accepted as legal tender. So they have to take this shit. They had, the Federal Reserve notes are all private script just as well. The same thing as any instruments that you're creating. They're doing the same thing. It's backed by nothing except the money that you make is backed by you. Okay, they're printing money backed by you too. They're not printing it based on nothing else other than you. So you have more of a right to issue currency than they do because you are you. So it are required by law to be accepted as legal tender of payment for all debts, public and private, and are defined in law as obligations of the United States. Any debt, any public debt is an obligation of the United States the minute that it becomes debt. So on the same par and category with Federal Reserve notes and other currency and legal tender obligations. So this is a law. Well, I mean, this is a memorandum, but it goes just the same. So everybody's gotten this already, but they're going to pretend to never have seen this shit before, of course, right? They play dumb really fucking well, and they keep a straight face, too. It's crazy. Great actors, but they can still get slapped. So, item tender for discharge of debt. The instrument tendered to the bank and negotiated to the United States Treasury for settlement is an obligation of the United States. Under this title, 18 U.S.C. Section 8, representing, as the definition provides, a certificate of indebtedness, meaning like a bill, an invoice, etc. A lien, right? A UCC1 lien is going to be a certificate of indebtedness, which means that you're going to be due that amount whenever you put a lien down. Now you can collect that. So drawn, if you can figure it out. So drawn upon an authorized officer of the United States. In this case, the Secretary of the Treasury, issued under an act of Congress, in this case, Public Law 73-10, HCR 192 of June 5th, 1933, and Title 31, USC 3123, and 31 USC 5103, and by treaty as well. So keep that in mind too, right? That's why you're going to be putting the $1 stamp down on all the instruments that you create, and you're never going to send one without that $1 stamp for the reason of taking part in this treaty that authorizes, that obligates these people to take your instruments. So the Universal Postal Union is gonna have your back on this as soon as you put that $1 down. So it really only costs $1 to get your rights, just like that. So in this case, the United Nations Conventions on International Bills of Exchange and International Promissory Notes, which, mind you, any instrument that you create and send to these dumbasses is going to be international because they're foreign to you, just like you're foreign to them. So it's always going to be international. National not meaning the country so much as the people. These people are foreign. We are not. So anything that you send them is going to be an international thing. It's going to be an international matter. Okay, and the Universal Postal Union headquarters in Bern, Switzerland. So the $1 stamp puts you right in that UPU. And if you need information on the Universal Postal Union, it's free. Email me. I'll send it right to you so you know what it is. because that's just really gonna that's gonna make a big difference in like whatever you do with this shit. Huge difference. That's why you'll never see a book like mine. Because people ain't really trying to fucking help you. They act like it a lot. Nobody's really trying to help you people. Okay? So Title 18, Part 1, Chapter 1, Section 1, Section 8. Section 8, obligation or other security of the United States defined the term obligation or other security of the United States. And the reason why I say nobody's trying to help you, because the way that I see them, literally like what I see, is them pretending to want to help you, but giving you half the truth all the time. I don't see anybody doing the shit that I do, and you probably never will, to be honest with you. So, includes all bonds, certificates of indebtedness, national bank currency, Federal Reserve notes, Federal Reserve bank notes, coupons. Coupons are just the money orders that you get at the bottom of your bill. That shit is all money. United States notes, Treasury notes, gold certificates, silver certificates, fractional notes, certificates of deposit, bills, checks, or drafts of money. All of it is money. Drawn upon or upon authorized officers of the United States, stamps and other representatives of value of whatever denomination issued under any act of Congress and canceled upon the United States stamp. That's why you put the stamp down and you cancel that shit. 45-degree angle, you tell them to fuck off 45 degrees. Just like that, because that's how they like it. From the back, hard like that. You know what I'm saying? So you put that down, cancel the stamp. As soon as you cancel the stamp, the shit is paid. All right? It's paid. So if they're going to deny payment, then the debt is discharged nonetheless. Courtesy of UCC 3, I think 1-04. 1-04, something like that. So the International Bill of Exchange is legal tender as a national banknote or note of a national banking association, which is you, because all of our straw men are private bankers. You're the authorized representative of that bank. So by legal and or statutory definition, UCC 4-105, 12 CFR, issued under authority of the United States. And it does come under that, because all the debt's gonna be payable to the United States. And mind you, debt is payable because debt is money. So it's payable to them. Okay? Debt is money. So Code 31 U.S.C. 392-5103, which officially defines this as statutory legal tender, obligation of the United States, and is issued in accordance with 31 U.S.C. 3123 and H.J.R. 192 of June 5, 1933, which establishes and provides for its issuance as public policy and remedy for discharge of equity interest recovery on that portion of the public debt to its principals and sureties bearing the obligation of the United States, because all public debt is an obligation of the United States, for the reason that when they rescinded the gold clause, they put us into a fiat currency. And the only reason why they were allowed to do that is because everybody at that time knew that they weren't going to have to pay for shit. And that's the only reason why they gave them their gold. They didn't punk nobody out of it. They're not that fucking gangster either. They literally tricked a bunch of people and shit like that. That's what happened. They're just a bunch of tricksters. That's all. So, but for that reason, and then so they were granted the privilege of operating their corporation, which you believe is your government. They were authorized the privilege to operate their corporation on our soil, and so they have to honor this shit, or else the fucking deal is off, and then you know what time that is. And I mean, you know what time that is. So this is a statutory remedy for equity, interest recovery due by the principals and sureties of the United States for discharge of lawful debts in commerce in conjunction with the U.S. obligations to that portion of the public debt that is intended to reduce. So that is the goal here, is to reduce the public debt. These people love to leave that shit lingering, which really it's money, okay? So the debt's sitting there as money because it's an outward remittance, which is a indication of your private credit, which is just lingering in the public, looking like debt, but it's actually payable to the people, okay? So during the financial crisis of the Depression in 1933, substance of gold, silver, and real money was removed as a foundation for our financial system. And in its place, the substance of the American citizenry, their real property, wealth, assets, and productivity that belonged to them was, in effect, pledged by the government and placed at risk as the collateral for the U.S. debt, credit, and currency for commerce to function. Now, knowing that they went ahead and pledged all your shit as collateral, it might be a good idea to put a UCC lien on it to commercially secure all of your shit, because they went ahead and fucking sold you out, okay? So this is the well-documented. I mean, they didn't sell you out; they sold out your entity essentially. That shit isn't you. So, but this is well documented in the actions of Congress and the president at the time in the congressional debates that preceded the adoption of the reorganizational measures. So Senate documents number whatever it is here, Under the new law, the money is issued to the banks in return for the government's obligations, bill of exchange, draft notes, trade acceptances, and bankers' acceptances, which is the A4V. And trust me, this shit works. You know, I got people hitting me up all the time telling me how their accounts are getting closed and all that. The shit is the real deal here. And I wouldn't be able to do that if this shit was nonsense. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not going to show you what I fucking really have, but trust me, this shit is real. So the money will be worth 100 cents on the dollar because it is backed by the credit of the nation. We have unlimited credit. And you can give it to yourself too, okay? So it will. So you don't even need a credit card. You just open up a trust account and give yourself credit, however much you think you need. It's really like that. So it will represent a mortgage on all of the homes and other property of all the people who live in the nation, which lawfully belong to these private citizens. That shit is ours. These people are bankrupt organizations pretending to be fucking people issuing you benefits, which, mind you, I don't understand how a bankrupt organization can ever give somebody a benefit. Where the fuck are they getting it from? They're getting it from you. As soon as you give them your social. You're giving yourself the benefit, but they're fucking just acting as a trustee, essentially. And I don't understand what benefit that is. So, especially when they're fucking eating off it too. So, if anybody's taking the benefit, it's them. So, the national debt is defined as mortgages on the wealth and income of the people of a country, their wealth and their income. So, the reorganization is evidenced by the Emergency Banking Act, March 9th, 1933, House Joint Resolution 192, June 5th, 1933, which is codified as Public Law 73-10, and it'll also be codified in all the state codes and statutes as well. They'll put it as something else, but it's going to be the same, along the same lines as far as them being obligated to discharge debt, because they have to go based on the federal guidelines because they are taking benefits from them, not you. They are, so they're going to be obligated to follow the federal guidelines, and the series of executive orders that surrounded them. So reopening of the banks, embargo on gold, payments and exports, and limitations on foreign exchange transactions. Transactions in foreign exchange are permitted under the governmental supervision, forbidding the hoarding of gold coin, gold bullion, gold certificates, etc. April 5th, 1933. Now, mind you, this was not for the people that they were issuing these orders for. These orders were for all of the corporations, never for the people, okay? So the people never had to give them shit, but some of them did. So on December 23rd, 1913, Congress had passed an act to provide the establishment of the Federal Reserve Banks to furnish an elastic currency to afford a means of rediscounting commercial paper to establish a more effective supervision on banking in the United States and for other purposes. The act is commonly known as the Federal Reserve Act. Now, mind you, these people are private bankers, right? Just like you and I. And the only thing that they have set up better than us is that electronic fucking fund transfer system. That's it. So aside from that, these people are doing nothing that we can't do. Okay, know that. And we actually have more power than they do because we are the fucking people. These people are just foreign actors that just somehow popped up here and are just running a company essentially, right? And that's it. So, but you actually fucking live here. You have a birthright to this land and everything on it. So keep that in mind. So one of the purposes for enacting the Federal Reserve Act was to authorize hypothecation and obligations, including United States bonds or other securities which Federal Reserve banks are authorized to hold under Section 14A, so 12 U.S.C. The term hypothecation, as stated in Section 14 of the Act, is defined as 1. Banking, offer of stocks, bonds, or other assets owned by a party of other than the borrower as collateral for a loan without transferring title. If the borrower turns the property over to the lender who holds it for safekeeping, the action is referred to as a pledge. So that's basically when you give them so when you go to the bank and make a deposit, you're pledging it to them. So that's why they're able to just fucking do whatever they want. You saw what they just did with the bail-in. You know what I'm saying? With the bail-in. So that's because you're lending it to them. And so they're actually, look, so whenever you deposit money to the bank, you lend it to them, you don't even have it. You're not liable to pay that tax anymore on that because you don't even have it. They do. So you gotta send the fucking liability over to them because they're the ones holding your money, not you. So if the borrower retains possession but gives the lender the right to sell the property in event of default, it is a true hypothecation. And that's what happens when they close on your mortgage and shit like that too. Even though you own the property, you gift it over to them. As soon as you sign that closing paperwork, the shit is signed. And the next paperwork that you sign is gifting it to them and making yourself a tenant at that point. Keep that in mind. I mean, if you think I'm lying, why don't you go look at your mortgage paperwork? You're a fucking tenant. So 2, securities. The pledging of negotiable securities to collateralize a broker's margin loan. The broker pledges the same securities to a bank as collateral for a broker's loan. The process is referred to as rehypothecation. So a little bit of A little bit of language that you might want to get familiar with here. It isn't really big in the shit that we do, but it's just good to know these definitions in general. So, as seen from their definitions, in hypothecation, there is equitable risk to the actual owner. And of course there is, right? So the bank assumes no liability. You assume all the liability. They lend out all the money that you give them. And if they fucking lose it, you got to fuck yourself. But if they make money, they get to keep it all. You get none. Awesome fucking deal. So we see the full faith and credit of the United States, which is the substance of the American citizenry. Their real property, wealth, assets, and productivity that belongs to them is thereby hypothecated and rehypothecated by the United States to its obligations as well as the Federal Reserve for the issuance and backing of Federal Reserve notes as legal tender for taxes, customs, and all other public dues. So Title 12 here, insurance to Federal Reserve banks, nature of obligation, redemption. Federal Reserve notes to be issued at the discretion of the Board of Governors at the Federal Reserve System for the purpose of making advances of Federal Reserve banks through the Federal Reserve agents, and hereinafter set forth for no other purpose are authorized. The said notes shall be obligations of the United States and shall be receivable by all national and member banks of the Federal Reserve banks and for all taxes, customs, and other public dues. So this is the last slide here. Then the next video I think will be a little bit more of this, and then we'll get into some more codes and statutes and things like that as well. I mean, you guys definitely got to know all this. There's just shit that you got to know because it's going to make you more confident in what it is that you're doing, and heighten the possibility of you actually fucking taking the chains off of yourself. So because once you do this and see that it actually works, and you're not, you're going to be in a whole different fucking world, trust me. So the commerce and credit of the nation continues on today under financial reorganization, bankruptcy, as it has since 1933. Still backed by the assets and wealth of the American citizenry at the risk of the government's obligation and currency. Under the 14th Amendment and numerous Supreme Court proceedings, as well as in equity, private property cannot be taken or pledged for public use without just compensation or due process of law. The United States cannot pledge or risk the property or the wealth of its private citizens for any government purpose without legally providing them remedy to recover what is due them on their risk. But they're really good at tricking you or making you believe that things work differently, right? So this principle is so well established in English common law and in the history of the American jurisprudence. The 14th Amendment provides no person shall be deprived of property without due process of law, and courts have long ruled to have one's property legally held as collateral or surety for a debt, even while he still owns it and still has it, is to deprive him of it, since it is at risk and could be lost for the debt at any time. So this basically means that if at any point they were to go ahead and try to seize your property that you put up as collateral, you're still going to have to be given a trial and things like that too. So unless you waive that in your contract, which, I mean, some of you may and some of you may not, but you definitely, I mean, you should read them. The United States Supreme Court said in its United States versus Russell, private property the Constitution provides shall not be taken for public use without just compensation. The right of subrogation is not founded on contract. It is a creature of equity. It is enforced solely on the purpose of accomplishing the ends of the substantial justice. Essentially, subrogation is meaning that you could pass the buck, and you give it to the fucking United States because they're the ones that own it. They're the ones who own all the debt, and is independent of any contractual relations between the parties. So aside from any contracts that you make, apparently this is going to stand anyway, regardless. So you always have the right to subrogate, which is basically passing the buck over to the assholes who created the fucking mess. You know what I mean? So whoever holds the gold has to pay the fucking bills. That's how that shit works, okay? So it is a game of chess. Stop playing checkers with these clowns. That's what I got for you for now. Till we meet again.